Hey everyone, we're back. This video, we're going to talk about how we tend to do recreation in the 21st century. It's going to be it's going to be sad. We're going to look at the 5 categories of activities that our hunter-gatherer ancestors engaged in. So music and dance, art and craft, stories, games, and visiting with people or gossiping. And what we're going to do is kind of look at how we meet those needs or how we use those activities to meet the need of recreation right now and how it's not going well. So, we're going to begin by really quickly covering music and dance and arts and crafts together. Now, importantly, this is not necessarily going to apply to you. We're talking sociologically, so we're talking about the average for people in our society, average Americans. And what we found, and this is really disturbing to me, for just meeting the need for recreation through music and dance, what we've got is only 2 to 3% of Americans listen to music or play music or dance on any particular day, which is kind of crazy to me, or at least I thought it was, because I think of myself as a very musical person. I play guitar, but I also listen to, I thought, a lot of music. And then I started going through this and thinking, and you're at a different age than I am. So I'm at an age where I've got kids, and so I'm like, taking them places, chauffeuring them around. And what I realized is that there are a lot of times where I will listen to a podcast when I'm in the car. Basically, in the car is when if I'm going to listen to music, that's when I do it. But there are times when I will listen to a podcast and I realize that I will go sometimes a day or two without listening to music, which is kind of disturbing to me because I love music. But I think as you get out of your youth, things can kind of get in the way of that. And I would kind of just encourage you to do what you can to not let that happen. Playing music, writing music in particular, but even just listening to it. And not listening to it while you're doing other things, but being able to just kind of sit and listen or listen with friends. But anyway, only 2 to 3% of Americans listen to that, and apparently I fall into that on some days. In terms of arts and crafts, it's even less, 1 to 2%. I'm trying to see where I can be, where I can let you see this without me getting out of screen. 1 to 2% of Americans engage in arts and crafts in a particular day. Not that you need to do all of these things, but it's interesting. Those are things that were very typical of our species. We just tend to not do them as much. But let's get to the big ones that we do. So stories, we definitely do it in terms of TV. Games, we definitely do it mostly in terms of video games. And visiting with people, yeah, this is super, super depressing. We do it in terms of social media. There's nothing wrong with social media, but we basically are replacing visiting and having conversations with people with going on social media. And it has the exact opposite of effect, as you're going to see when we get there. But let's start out with stories. So most of the stories we get are through TV and through movies. We on average in America, watch TV for about 2.5 hours a day. And that's fine to an extent. I'm not here to kind of shame you about that. What I'm here to do is talk to you about how those stories are different than the stories that we would tell each other around campfires, either when we're camping ourselves nowadays or our hunter-gatherer ancestors. The stories that we see on TV or that we see in movies are told to us in order to make money. That's the purpose. There are other purposes as well, but it is getting on TV because it is either being sold to a subscription service like Netflix, or it's in a movie theater, which is to make money, or it's on network television in order to generate advertising revenue. And it is significant that that is the case because a particular kind of story gets told over and over and over again. It's a story, and this is all covered if you took my sociological theory class, which is called Big Ideas and Big Thinkers. I do a extraordinarily long video on Neil Postman, who wrote an amazing book that I recommend to everybody called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And what it talks about is when you go from a print culture into an electronic media culture, you change the nature of the stories that get told. They have to be visually entertaining. That's more important than plot. And they have to resolve relatively quickly. You could spend days and weeks reading a book, but most people, when they watch something on TV, what they come to expect is some degree of resolution every 30 to 60 minutes, or in the case of a movie, an hour and a half. That's important because advertisers want stories that are going to be simple, not overly challenging. Now, you'll be able to think of examples that aren't that way, but when we're talking about the average thing that people consume, what we're talking about is stories that aren't overly intellectually challenging, so that you are fresh and able to see and take in advertisement. So the stories are told to make money. If you're making up a story around a campfire, you're doing it purely to entertain your friends. Novels are told in order to hopefully impart some degree of wisdom about the way life works. But TV, it can have that, doesn't necessarily have to. What it has to do is sell to people. I got to this a little bit when I was talking about making money, but the solutions, the problems have to have relatively simple solutions. They have to get wrapped up in 30 minutes to an hour and a half if it's a movie, which means, and this is a point that Neil Postman makes, it changes who you and I are as people. We come to see problems as things that have solutions that are relatively easy to come up with. You can solve problems relatively quick. You just have to find the solution to it. It's just it's not a matter of it being overly complicated. It's a matter of looking at the problem in the right perspective, which is a major problem if you are teaching people that, because most problems in the real world aren't simple. Trying to solve the problem of Middle East peace is not something that can be done in an hour and a half, or if somebody tells you, I know the solution to this. Nobody knows the solution to this, but we're conditioned to expect that problems must have a simple solution if we just look at it the right way, and that makes us vulnerable to politicians who are going to tell us, it's not as hard as everybody makes it sound. It absolutely is. Don't trust people who tell you that it's not. The reason that they tell you it's not is because we've been conditioned to think things are going to have simple solutions. Our expectations of the world are shaped by the stories that we hear. Third is a word called hyperreality. Spend just a little bit of time watching just how quickly the cuts happen in TV or movies. Generally speaking, you will have a change of camera every 2 to 5 seconds. And things are often visually way more interesting than the pace of nature is. This is a problem for us because we tend to then expect things. I mean, you're watching this right now and you're bored, and I don't blame you for that. And I will take some of the responsibility, but some of the responsibility is not you. It's the stories that you have been exposed to for most of your life, and the expectation for entertainment that you have. Not everything is supposed to be entertaining. Education doesn't have to be entertaining. Education is education. Politics doesn't have to be entertaining. It is about people making persuasive arguments, but we don't think about these things this way because the stories we have been told for our entire lives have been presented to us super entertainingly. That hyper reality is the things are more stimulating than real life is, and it makes us bored. And if you're bored and tune out when people are talking about solutions to complicated problems and you just go with the person who is the most entertaining, it's not necessarily the person who's going to be able to offer the best solutions. So that's a problem. Um, and finally, TV as compared to stories that our ancestors would have told is you can do this yourself. You can do this by yourself. I alluded to this in the last video. I can go home, turn on Netflix, and binge watch a show. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that every once in a while. It's fine. Like I do that. It's not terrible. But it is important to understand what you are substituting for. You're substituting for a social activity of stories, of you and your friends gathered around together and one person telling a story and everybody else engaging in that socially and you being able to talk about it as it's happening. We can watch TV by ourselves, and that's not necessarily bad, but it isn't the nourishing connection with people that we originally got from stories. Okay, I'm going to try to get through this a little bit faster, but that's super important. That whole idea of stories. I mean, again, I can't recommend Neil Postman enough. This stuff changes us as human beings. We are a different kind of human being because of the types of stories and the way the stories are presented to us than we would be otherwise. You would be a different type of person if you'd never watched TV. Not just you would know different things, you would think differently and expect different things. Okay, let's go to games and video games. Games were what our hunter-gatherer ancestors have always done. Nowadays, generally speaking, we spend more time. The average American spends 1 to 2 hours playing video games a day. That's more time than they spend playing games in the real world. But there are pros here. Some TV is really entertaining. I guess that's the pro over there. Over here, you can improve your reasoning and problem-solving skills depending on the game that you play, and that's good. They also can improve self-esteem, particularly as you develop the ability, the efficacy to defeat the game. That translates into real positive feelings about yourself, which can translate into the real world. And this can be social. Some of the best times I've had with my family have been the four of us playing like Mario Brothers together, and it's hilarious, and we laugh at how bad I am at it, but it's great. Super positive. It can be all of those things, but there are also definite cons. Video games are designed to be addictive. They're that idea of hyper reality again. They're brighter, they're quicker, they're more visually captivating than real life is. And you also it's designed to give you little hits of dopamine when you unlock something, when you accomplish something. And those accomplishments are laid out in a way that as you progress through the game, you get better and you develop the ability to accomplish more things. And it's which is where your self-esteem comes from, but it's also hit of dopamine after hit of dopamine after hit of dopamine. So they can be a thing where it's good for you, but it can be something you get stuck in. And then the dark side of the whole social part. It can be a social replacement, just as we can go home and binge Netflix by ourselves. We can also play video games by ourselves, or it's not the end of the world to play them online with other people, but it does it can feel like you are getting the social connection that you need. And I'm not saying that you necessarily won't, but it isn't the same as being in person. It isn't the same. We evolve to get what we evolve to get, which is a specific kind of social connection, a visual one and a tactile one as well. Okay. So whereas our hunter-gatherer ancestors played games, we do that in terms of video games. The worst, though, of all is exchanging visiting for people with social media. On average, the average American spends a little over 2 hours, 2 hours and 14 minutes on social media a day. Really disturbingly, we spend about 35 minutes a day socializing in person. So we're talking about 5 times more social media than going out and just having conversations with people. And the thing is, social media is just kind of bad for us. Um, Social media increases anxiety, increases depression, increases loneliness, increases, I spelled it wrong, body dysmorphia, not dysmorphia, body dysmorphia, which is your sense that your body is not good enough, which sucks. Um, this is a point that is so much easier for a middle-aged man to make than for a young man or a young woman to hear or to put into practice, but I'm going to say it anyway because it is true. Your body was not does not exist primarily to be looked at. It exists primarily to do things. What we evolved to do recreationally was play, make music, dance. All of those things are activities that you do. But social media makes us think that my body does not look the right way. It doesn't look as good as those people's do. And that is just not a path to happiness. It's not a path to fulfillment. Um, and it's really important to understand that these social media platforms were designed to get you sucked in to that, to feel like you're not good enough, and then to go and try to do something to improve yourself, and then go check in and see where you think that you fit. And it's a losing battle because I was 18 once and now I'm 54, and things don't get better as you get older. But I mean, some things do. Like, it's great. I would love being this age, but there's, I'm not like I can't compare myself to what a 20-year-old looks like. That's not and it wouldn't be, even if I could, it wouldn't be the path to success or to a fulfilling life, because I'm just going to keep getting older, and there's going to be a new 20-year-old to replace that other 20-year-old, and another one to replace that one. Um, Try to get back to the idea that your body uh, primarily exists to do things. Find things to do for recreation that allow you to move in ways that are intrinsically enjoyable, ideally outdoors, ideally with other people. Um, so that's Uncle Chris talking a little bit more than Professor Chris. All right, that's what you got. What we have here are stories turning into TV, games turning into video games, visiting with people turning into social media. All of them are, at least to a degree, detrimental. Video games a little bit less so, especially if you can kind of get yourself to do them in a room with other people and not become addicted to it. All right. But let's say you decide that you were gonna ditch all of this. I'm not watching TV ever again. I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm not playing video games. I'm not doing social media. With all these things, do them in moderation. But let's say you decide you're just going to go cold turkey and you're going to live as hunter-gatherer a life in terms of recreation. You're going to make your own music, and you are going to play games socially with other people without any mediating technology, and you're never going on social media. You're just going to hang out around the campfire with people. Fantastic. Like, if you want to do that, do that. In the next video, we're going to talk about, but what if no one else does? Then where are you left? And that'll be depressing. We'll talk about that then.